Hi. Hi, I'm another Hashmi. I'm a professor at Babson, and I'm here to talk about the work Tom Malone from MIT and I have been working on regarding group size, collaboration tools, and how that all affects collective intelligence. So the title of our paper, Effects on Collective Intelligence of Online Collaboration Tools and Group Size. And you'll kind of see why and how this plays out. So our main motivation kind of stemmed from the idea that um, that when you have a smaller group, you'll tend to see these, working well, they're collaborating well, they're able to accomplish more. And then you add a few more people, it still kind of goes well. Add a few more people, it still kind of goes well. But at a certain point, the more people you have in your group, it becomes chaotic. And this is a case for it to be face to face, right? Up until it's really nice, the more and more people you bring into your group, it becomes more and more chaotic. And so our question was, at what point does it become chaotic online? And how does that compare to what we see face to face? And can we then distinguish the face to face and online groups in a way to understand what the best team size is or the optimal group sizes? And how does that all using collective intelligence so for as a group performance metric? So that's really where our hypothesis or our motivation kind of came from. So in this particular talk, I will talk to you in more detail about those hypotheses, where they're stemming from, the method we used, the results, and finally the conclusions and the next steps that we have in store for our study. So where does the actual motivation come from? The hypothesis? There's three different hypotheses, right? The first one is that the collective intelligence score will continue to increase beyond, there's no sort of knowing at what point it's going to stop. It's just going to kind of keep increasing. The second is that as a group size increases, we will see it's plateauing. We'll see that at a certain point, it's nice to keep adding more and more people to your group. You'll get benefits. That's going to be helpful for your collective intelligence score, but at a certain point, it's going to plateau. That means that no matter how many more people you add to your group, you do not see the benefits. But you don't see any sort of decreased performance either. And that leads us to our third hypothesis, which basically says that it'll be nice to keep adding people to your group until a certain point, and then it becomes a challenge, and there's many difficulties, and so you will see that performance decrease, and therefore you will see the nice inverted kind of a U for the collective intelligence score. At some point, it becomes bad to have more people on your team, in your group. And what we hypothesized is that these peaks, if you will, are going to be different for both online versus face to face. And so this basic package of these three hypotheses stands at both the online group as well as the face to face. But where and how that happens is going to be the differing factor for the online versus the face-to-face. And I'll explain more as we get to the hypothesis. For instance, we expect an inverted U across the different conditions. We have two conditions. One is single editing and the other is multi-editing. In single editing, only one person has the ability to type in the answers. And in multi-editing, everyone is able to synchronously input and collaborate and provide the answers. Those are the two different conditions. And what we hypothesize is that irrespective of which group you're in, whether which condition you're in, whether you are in the single editing condition, which kind of mimics the face-to-face, or whether you are in the multi-editing, which mimics, well, it doesn't mimic anything, it's just basically all of us working together at the same time, online sort of a scenario, they both are going to have the inverted U's. at a certain point, it's going to be nice to have more people, but at a certain point, it's going to become more detrimental than it is beneficial. And the reason we say this is because the literature, this is most of the literature, discusses that and shows that group size, after a certain group size, both the performance, decision making, and effectiveness all decrease. And their basis is that process losses, coordination losses, all sort of become more pronounced, and they take over versus the benefits of more members in your group. So that's our first hypothesis. Despite the condition you're in, you're going to go ahead and see that nice inverted U. Now, our second hypothesis says that, listen, for the single editing tool, collaboration tool condition, we will see an optimal group size for the CEI to be between 5 and 10 team members in your group. So our single editing tool, as I said previously, mimics or was meant to mimic face-to-face. And what this is saying is that we are creating a condition that we expect to see face-to-face, simulating face-to-face. And so we would expect the same thing that we see in the literature. In the literature, it's always from Hashmi, Mueller, and so on and so forth. They've all discussed how the optimal group size has been between 5 and 7. And so we expect the same thing. We said, here we are creating a condition that mimics face-to-face, we should see the same thing that we see or we've heard of in the previous literature. And so that's our second hypothesis. Our third one now focuses on the online condition and says that we don't know what to expect or where that optimal group size is going to be, but we expect it to be greater than 20. And the basis of this is that it's really just one main study where they had group sizes up to maybe 32, or not maybe, but they actually had group size of 32. And they compared it to groups of 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. And they made that comparison. And what Mao et al. Found that group size of 32 outperformed all of the other group sizes. And that group didn't study larger group sizes. So there's no way to know whether 32 was an optimal group size, maybe 50 was, and maybe 60 was, we don't know. So that's when we were looking at this and we said, well, if we have to base it on previous literature, all we know for sure is that it's going to be greater than 20. And the reason why we sort of didn't pick 32, but for our hypothesis, but we picked 20, is the fact that Mao et al. Had asynchronous, and they were working asynchronously in their study, while we were working synchronously. So we expected some effect of face-to-face kind of spilling over into our setup. Because you are working synchronously, you are kind of collaborating in real time. Mao et al. Had the luxury of doing asynchronous experiments, so people were able to log in at their, when they wanted to. So in our case, we were saying, no, we're not giving them that luxury. They're going to be working together. And so there is some effect of face-to-face, which is why we decided 20 as a caution and not 32 like them. So those are 3 different hypotheses. Now, what I'm going to do next is kind of talk to you about our conditions and discuss the setup for where we actually ran the study. The way we did it is that we created an online tool that allowed people from no matter where you are in the world to log on, connect with your colleagues or team members, and run a series of tests within a certain time period. And then we would kind of score those, and from that develop our collective intelligence score and be able to assess how you have performed. This was work by Carnegie Mellon, MIT, and Union College. So, oops, this is should run from the beginning. Here we go. I'll just run maybe a minute of this so you see this is where they're logging in. So you just kind of enter your whatever user login you're assigned. You click start, decide what you want to have people see on the screen or have them refer to you. And on the left-hand side, you can see is the actual question. Let me just kind of pause it for a second so I can explain it. Come on. So I'm going to pause it over here to explain it a little bit more. On the right-hand side is where they have the ability to chat. The middle pane here allows and forces them, not forces them, is where they will be inputting all of the answers. And the left-hand side is where they are able to read the questions. What you see in front of you is what every single team member sees in front of them. The names, what they're typing, and this is all real time. In this particular case, you can see there's 4 people, and they're all typing to each other. And they have not right now put any of the answers, but that's the next step. And over here on the left-hand pane is the actual task or questions that we pose to them. So it's kind of walking you through what I just walked you through. Here's another example of that. We see, they also get a timer. They're told when the session begins. And now you will see them kind of first, I guess, saying hi to each other and then typing together. This is what the tool is actually really powerful for. You get to see who's typing in which color and how in particular case is what we call the multi-editing version, where everybody is able and has a capability of typing together at the same time. Our second condition, single editing, would not allow so many people to be typing together. You would only see one person typing while the other have the ability to chat. So they would be chatting together on this right-hand side, talking to each other, but none of them, except for the scribe, would have the ability to type in the answer. And if you think about how that kind of mimics face-to-face, it is, if you're in a group and you're told to do a certain task, only one person has the ability to actually write out all the answers and then submit them. And so we were going ahead and working with that idea that only one person would be able to type in the answers and do that, which is why the single editing only allows one person to edit, while multi-editing allows everyone to edit at the same time. So this is a little kind of a preview to our tool, and obviously you can contact me or any of the email addresses to find out more about it. And so that is the platform we used. The specific task we use for our study, and I have to kind of keep track of the time, is we had 5 different tasks. One was reproducing the text. So you were given certain text and the group was asked to reproduce it. Gave them 6.5 minutes for it. Another was solving abstract reasoning questions, and they got harder and harder as you went along. They had 3.5 minutes to do it. You were given 24 words, told to unscramble it within 2 minutes. Solving a Sudoku puzzle, 3.5 minutes. And finally, brainstorming uses of a brick for 2 minutes. Again, this is across both conditions. Here's an example. Now, our particular data size or data setting, what were the groups that we looked at? It ranged from 5 to 40. And so we had groups of 5, groups of 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and 40. And we ran the power analysis to get the idea that within each group size, we wanted 10 groups as a minimum. So we set out saying both the conditions, single scribe and multi-scribe, require 10 groups each within each group size. And so that's what we set out to kind of do. For our actual experiment, we used MTurk as our base for pulling in subjects. We set a pretty high criterion. We wanted them to have an 80% or more approval rate, having successfully completed 500 or more hits. They needed to be located either in the US or Canada. We were specific about that because we wanted English-speaking countries in similar time zones. So we selected US and Canada only. We didn't want any nuances from other geographic locations. And we paid them about $4 for approximately 25 minutes, which for MTurk is a pretty high paying hit. And we were pretty popular on MTurk for quite a long time as we were running these experiments. The way we did it is that we ran 4 sessions daily, including the weekend. So we covered all 7 days and ran 4 of them at 12 o'clock, 3 p.m., 6 p.m., and 9 p.m. Eastern. And the way we did it is that, the way we thought of it is that those times will coordinate well across the different time zones, and you should still be able to get a nice number of, a nice range of random people being able to come together. And these groups, and the way it happened is that they were assigned randomly to the group sizes, and we had written up a Python script that allowed us to randomly place these people into those group sizes, and those group sizes were selected randomly, and then we went and we had started the POG system. So it was sort of a 1-step and 2-step, and you kind of got in there. It took us about 7 weeks to complete. And so it's quite a nice, fun time kind of doing this. And so what did we see from the results? What we saw is that we started to see that nice kind of an inverted U. And you can see that from the purple line is the multi-scribe, while the green line is the single scribe. And you can begin to see that as the group size started to increase, you do see it kind of coming down again. Maybe not as nicely as we expected, maybe not as steeply as we would expect it, but we started to sort of begin to kind of see that. And to sort of verify that, we created 2 models. The first model it looked at the quadratic. Sorry, looked at the so now obviously I'm kind of stopping myself because I was rushing through it. The first one is simply a linear equation, while the other is a quadratic equation. And we did mean center it because we didn't want them to, because we are kind of squaring them. So we created 2 models. One is sort of linear, the other is quadratic, kind of getting the curvilinear. I want to verify and make sure those constants or those interaction effects were significant or not, to verify that what we hypothesized from that first glance graph is actually true or not. So the first model, we did find the quadratic term to be significant. And if you kind of couple that with the visual graph, confirmed the curvilinear inverted U relationship. However, the quadratic interaction term was not significant. And what that means is that we cannot conclude that the 2 conditions were parallel or were not parallel. So right now, the graphs, which we thought either they could be parallel or they could be kind of off to each other, but our data did not necessarily confirm or deny whether or not those 2 curvilinear relationships are parallel or not. Ideally, you would want them not to be parallel, and that way we can, conclusively conclude, significant, or whatever the term is, to specifically say that they're not parallel, which means one did better than the other, or both did worse, or whatever conclusion you want to reach. All we can say is, hey, they're not parallel. All we can say is we don't know whether or not they are parallel. So that's really all we can kind of conclude from our results. And if you were to go ahead and make a predicted value based off of those 2 models, we begin to see, you can sort of see where the optimal group size might be different across them, and we'll see in a much more sort of a detail of where that kind of fell. And essentially what we found is that for the multi-scribe, we found the group size to be, optimal group size to be between the 32 and 35 range, while for the single scribe, single editing tool, we found the optimal group size to be between around 25 um, and somewhat 25 and 30 is really what we kind of, it's a bit of a larger range. So that's really what our results and using a predictive modeling, what we found. And now, which was not necessarily everything we expected. We did, based on our first hypothesis, we did confirm that a curvilinear relationship existed. And our second hypothesis remained unsupported. We could not substantiate that the group size for a single scribe or single editing was between 5 and 20, was above 20. And but for the third hypothesis, the multi-editing tool, multi-editing condition, we did confirm that it was actually a group size greater than 20. And so, why do we see this? Um, we had a few different hypotheses. One, we had a few different ideas or thoughts into why we did not necessarily see what we expected to see, specifically for the single editing condition. Why the group size was not between 5 and 7. And the reason is that we felt that the condition we created for the single editing may not necessarily have mimicked truly a face-to-face representation, may not have been a true representation of the face-to-face. It's possible that inadvertently we had introduced many collaboration tools they would not have available for if it were to be a true face-to-face. For instance, the chatting interface. You can imagine that if you're in a group face-to-face, if somebody speaks, there's no turn taking necessarily. There could be turn taking, but for the most part, if everybody says something, you lose a lot of, or there's a lot of noise cancellation. There's a lot of sort of lost in those kind of interactions. Yet when you have the chatting, if you say something, somebody is bound to read it because it's very clear. You can kind of follow along. And so the chatting in itself is a collaboration tool that may not be present in face to face. And there's no, and when you're in a room, there's certainly physical distances that kind of start to interact with your performance. You could be sitting further away from your team, one of your team members, if you're in a circle even, or if depending on your arrangement. Now, the way we had set it up, there was no physical distance. They're all there. They're all sort of, you're all equidistance. You really don't know. There's not even concept of a distance on our online tool. And finally, in face to face, you have a lot of social cues, and that too is difficult to mimic online, which we felt we didn't do. The body language, the emotions, or even the tone of voice is not kind of captured necessarily online. And so we felt like the reason we saw those results for the single editing was because it didn't truly mimic the face-to-face. The other thing that we could have seen and what we weren't expecting for the online was how large the group size, and kept going on beyond, like sort of expected that we originally thought. Well, we didn't really, but anyways, it may have been because a particular type of tasks that we may also be sort of a tailored towards, maybe inadvertently might have been tailored towards a larger group size. So that's really kind of where we came in from in terms of the group and how it kind of functioned. I'm sort of running a little low on time, but if you have any questions, please get in touch with me and or Tom. And we hope to continue this work to explore how much benefit you get from each person, to explore in terms of what happens when you get larger and larger group sizes. So there's all sorts of fun things happening in the background that we hope to be able to kind of talk to you about in the near future. So thank you again for listening to our presentation, and hope to connect with you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.